local review body on 29th of May 2019. I can confirm that this meeting has been properly called and is quorate. Can I first ask members to appoint a chairman for this meeting? Tim?
Nominate Councillor Dempster.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the local review body meeting on Wednesday, 29th of May. It's gone 10:30 and we are quorate. Can we have Sederunt, please, Tracy?
Next Chairman, yes, there are 5 members present, everyone present.
And are there any declarations of interest, members? Okay. And Tracy, can you take us through the process, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that there are 3 notices of review for consideration at this meeting. And as a preliminary matter, I can advise that there is an updated 2019 Developer Contribution Likelihood Table, which is the appendix to the Developer Contribution Supplementary Guidance A, and a copy has been given to members and is available for those attending the meeting. The parts of the papers superseded are pages 191 to 200 in relation to item 4 and pages 321 to 330 in relation to item 5. The first item, item 4, is Dalton Hook Farm, Lockerbie, refusal of planning permission in principle for the erection of dwelling house, reference 181618 PIP. Within your papers you have your notice of review document, your report on handling, observations of the appointed officer on the applicant's agent's notice of review, the comments of the applicant's agent on observations of the appointed officer, the planning application form submitted with plans and supporting information, the decision letter from Dumfries and Galloway Council, relevant extracts from the Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan, and photos of the application site and locality. The grounds for refusal are that it has not been satisfactorily demonstrated that a new dwelling house is essential at this location for the operational needs of the agricultural business, and accordingly the proposal is contrary to the policy of the Council as stated in Local Development Plan Policy H3 and associated supplementary guidance, and to national policy as set out in the Scottish Planning Policy, which permit the erection of new houses in the countryside only in special circumstances identified in development plans, and none of these circumstances apply in this case. The requested method of determination is to be 1 on the basis of an assessment of the review documents only with no further procedure, and 2 on the basis of further written submissions. The grounds stated in the notice of review are in summary: 1. Consultations. There are no objections by the consultee or others. 2. The planning officer correctly states that LDP2 is a material consideration, albeit of limited weight, at this well advanced stage in the examination process, but the policies and proposals do not remain materially unaltered as cannot be met in a nearby settlement, has been removed from the criteria in Policy H3. It is therefore not correct to state that the proposed plan has no effect on this application, as part of the policies used to refuse the application have been removed. 3. Principle of development. The proposal complies with items 4.4 to 4.6 of the officer's report. The last sentence in 4.7 is unreasonable. The proposal complies with Development Management Practice Note Policy H3 and 4.8, and it is accepted by the officer that the farm is economically viable. 4. In response to 4.9 of the officer's report, the submitted information confirms that an additional specialist worker is required to be housed on the farm in the interests of animal welfare and the absolute need to attend immediately when emergencies occur. 5. In response to 4.10 of the officer's report, the addition of expanded technology on the farm requires a specialist worker to reside on the farm, and although the existing workers will have a limited knowledge of the technology, they will not have the expertise to deal with a major emergency which requires specialist and immediate attention to ensure that animal welfare is paramount at all times. The real difficulty arises when there is possibly only 1 or 2 employees available when an emergency occurs out with normal working hours, and the additional specialist farm worker would form part of a rota system to ensure sufficient manpower is available to deal with emergencies during unsocial hours. 6. In response to 4.11 of the officer's report, the dwelling house is essential for the reasons stated in all the supporting information. In response to 4.12 of the officer's report, it is not a question of the dwelling house being desirable, as an essential need has been fully demonstrated in the supporting information. In summary, the labour requirement report confirms that there is a shortfall of 5.87 units on this farm. There is no objection by the planning officer to the location of the house. It is the labour requirement report that demonstrates the need for the operational requirements of the farm. The invitation to visit the farm to assess the operational requirements was not accepted by the planning officer, and it would have been helpful in arriving at a different decision. This is an expanding farming operation and should be supported in the Dumfries and Galloway region, which is a predominantly farming area. The stock levels have increased and additional robotic milking machines have been installed, requiring an additional specialist worker to ensure continuity of the milking process. It is widely accepted throughout the farming industry in Scotland and beyond that there is a real and worrying shortage of experienced farm workers, which is causing extreme difficulties in the industry, especially where experienced and specialist workers are required. The requirements of experienced and specialist farm workers must meet the high standards expected by them and their families, as it is important that good quality and modern accommodation is available on the farm, and it is for this reason and because of the essential need for a skilled and specialist worker that a new house is required to attract a specialist and experienced worker for this farm. The capital expenditure in providing a new house is considerable and to the farm owner, but this expense is necessary to attract the quality of person required. You also have further comments by interested parties, including the roads planning team leader, the appointed officer, archaeologist and Scottish Water. You have the list of the development plan policies available. So the main issues for the local review body to consider are: does the proposal conform with the relevant development plan policies, especially in terms of LDP policy H3 and associated supplementary guidance? Has it been satisfactorily demonstrated that a new dwelling house is essential at this location for the operational needs of the agricultural business or not? Would the farm be able to operate successfully without a further dwelling house? Has it been demonstrated throughout the various submissions that there is sufficient justification for an additional full-time experienced and specialist farm worker to reside on the farm? If the proposal is considered by members to be contrary to the terms of the local development plan, are there any material considerations which would indicate that planning permission should be granted to the contrary? If members were minded to reverse the appointed officer's decision and grant planning permission for this proposal, what conditions would they wish to see attached? The options for the local review body are: having outlined the papers, it now falls to the LRB to determine whether it has sufficient information to consider the review. It has confirmed that no representations from any party will be heard today. And your options are: to decide it has sufficient information before it to enable it to determine the review today, request further information in the form of written representations. The local review body will be required to state precisely the information it is seeking and who must provide it. Resolve to hold a hearing, again specifying who is invited to speak and on what matters. Resolve to hold a site visit, accompanied or unaccompanied. This can be done in conjunction with any of the above, but would obviously not allow a decision to be made today. If the local review body resolves that it has sufficient information and that no further procedure is required, then the local review body has the full powers to uphold, reverse or vary a determination. The decision notice will include a statement of the terms in which the planning authority has decided the case reviewed. A planning advisor is present at your meeting. He is here to assist for all items on the agenda today, and it is confirmed that he has not had any involvement in any of the cases and was not the case officer or appointed officer for any of the applications. He is purely here to provide independent advice as needed on matters of planning policy, law or the process of the local review body. So if members are clear and no further clarification is required, I will ask the chairman now to lead the debate and in the first instance to lead the review body through the papers together and decide if they have sufficient information to make a determination today.
Thanks, Tracy. Members, Robert Duncan has colour images that are replicated in your papers here. Do you want to see them, or do you want to first decide whether or no you have enough information to proceed today? Or do you simply want to decide what we do in terms of whether we have sufficient information, whether we want further information, resolve a hearing again, resolve to hold a site visit, or do we have enough information before us in order to progress and determine this appeal today? Councillor McKee?
I'd like to see the pictures first, Chair, and if we could go through the papers, there's maybe some questions that we could ask as we go through the papers, and then we could determine whether we've got sufficient information or not, if you didn't mind.
Okay, that's fine. Any members, any objection to see the images? In that case, Robert, can you show us the images, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just for the avoidance of doubt, as you've said, these replicate the pictures you find in your papers between pages 217 and 221. I haven't visited the site. These photographs have been supplied by the case officer who was involved in preparing the delegated report, so I'm reliant on the captions that you see. So the first one, this is a view of the application site. As you can see, it's part of a current field in agricultural use. This is a view of the application site. It's looking towards Dalton Hook Farm in the distance to the west of the application site, just in the middle ground there. This is a view of the application site seen looking north and the existing dwellings visible on the right hand side. If it helps as a reference, you've got the location plan on page 75 of your papers and the block plan on page 77. So when you look at page 77, you see the application site on the left-hand side, and you can see the gable end of this building and the garage. You can see just the right-hand side, just sitting next to the U346A public road, just to give you an idea of how the application site sits next to it. This is a view of the access from the main road going to the farm itself, and the existing cottages immediately to the east. Now, again, I would refer to the location plan you've got on page 77 to show that. It's indicated that the existing access is to be retained. That's a view of number 2 Dalton Hook cottages on the right hand side there, with number 1 to the left. And those are all the images I have from the officer.
Thanks, Robert. Okay, members, happy to have Councillor McKee ask questions, but at some stage we will have to decide whether or no we have enough information to determine this application today, and if not, what other additional information or what other activities we want to engage in to be sure we are satisfied when we make a decision it's the right one. Councillor McKee. Keep your microphone on, please.
I'm concerned that a lot of this application is based on the requirement for trained staff. But they've got 2 family members. Should they now be trained first? And what can they operate now? Have you any idea what the operating hours are of this? It's the specialist milking machines and that sort of thing. Can they operate out with normal hours without anybody being there? Again, that seems to be one of the main reasons why this application is there.
I think that the operation plan for the farm would probably indicate what the hours are. That is the reason why we're here, because the applicant claims that it's an absolute necessity to have another house on farm, and the case officer is of the opinion that this can be managed well with another member of staff being located off-site. There is no argument about the basis for the formula being arrived at. There's no argument about the location. The argument is whether or no it is absolutely essential to have this property built on-site to support the farm. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, the shortfall of 5.87 labour units is not disputed. Could I have clarification on pages 64 and 65? That 5.87 labour units figure is based, I think, on the amount of labour required to farm the land that the farm owns. With adjacent to it, we have a farm that they also rent, and we have a total amount of acreage. I'm just wondering why that is not the figure that's taken into account in calculating the labour units, the total amount of land that is farmed rather than owned.
Robert.
Looking at the figures on pages 64 and 65, you've got the table on page 64, which indicates one standard labour unit is 1,900 hours per year. It then looks at the calculated labour for the unit, and that's based only on the owned land farmed by the business. So that's owned land. Total hours 16,860. Now, when you divide that by 1,900, it gives you 8.87 labour units. You've got the table on page 65, but it says that is based on all land farmed by the business, including rented land. So it's providing a bigger figure of 19,517.6 hours in the unit. You divide that by 1,900, you get 10.27. So if you take into account the owned land farmed by the business, you're looking at a calculation of 8.87 labour units. And from what I can see, when you look, with regard to the other questions as to the stated need for the development, when you look at page 63, it says in summary, the calculation demonstrates that the business requires 8.87 labour units against a work capacity of 1,900 hours per man year. So that's the calculation they've taken on the basis of the land owned by the business.
But that's my point, Robert, if you don't mind. Why are we just calculating it in the land owned rather than all the land that the farm utilises?
The reason for that is you can then tie, there's a degree of certainty of the land tied to the business. You could, for example, impose a Section 75 obligation or a planning condition on the land owned. With it rented, it may be just a fluid arrangement. It may not be an arrangement of permanence. So it's generally taken to be the land that is farmed permanently.
So, sorry for pushing this, but I feel it's the key point. So if a farm is tenanted, the farmer is the tenant of a large landowner, and he farms his tenanted farm, and would the business case for an additional housing not be valid because he doesn't own that land? Is it only owned land that comes into this type of calculation?
It's an issue that's covered in the supplementary guidance, which I will just have a quick look at just now to answer that question. It's not the kind of application I normally deal with, so forgive me for being a bit hesitant on this. If you look at the housing in the countryside, LDP supplementary guidance, which starts on page 201, you obviously have policy H3. You're then looking at on page 205, it's got a section on agricultural or rural business need, which is what we're looking at here. So in cases, it says, for example, in the second paragraph under the heading agricultural rural business needs, it says this part of the policy also acknowledges that there are particular circumstances when a new house in the rural area is required to accommodate a full-time worker who is employed in a business that requires a rural location. So those are the general set of circumstances we have here. Where the nature and demands of the work concerned make it essential for the person engaged in the business to live at or very close to the site of their work.
But I don't think it at all specialises where the land that business utilises is either owned or rented on page 205. It just says the labour requirements, including the need for specialist workers and the level of attention needed outside normal hours. Second bullet point.
I suppose it might be long-term viability must be demonstrated, and if you rent land, there is no long-term viability because that can be changed relatively quickly depending upon what arrangement might be in place.
The thing I'm drawing on page 206, if you look at the paragraph just above the heading Retirement Succession on a Viable Farm Holding, it says, permission granted under this part of the policy may be subject to a planning obligation designed to ensure that any house constructed is tied in ownership to the farm or business concern, which was used to demonstrate the essential need for that development. Where essential need is demonstrated by an agricultural labour report covering a whole farm, then the house will be expected to be tied in ownership to the whole farm and not to a restricted part of the farm holding assessed.
So it does mention the whole farm, so it depends on your definition of a whole farm. Does whole farm mean owned land plus rented land?
It doesn't make a distinction in the supplementary guidance, so I would say it would, of necessity, if you're looking at essential need, it would have to include both owned land and rented land. That's my interpretation looking at this.
No, I appreciate that, and thank you for that. So I would say, going back to page 65, if we include the rented land, there is a further need for additional labour if we include the amount of labour required to farm all the land farmed by that.
Our planning officer isn't arguing about the need. The planning officer is saying that this can be managed if the individual employed was located in the locality rather than immediately within the farm boundary.
I appreciate that, and I thank the officer for his clarification. The point I'm trying to make is the refusal was because there was a shortfall of 5.87 labour units, and I think the officer said that figure is based on the owned land. If we include all the land, that brings the figure up to 7.87, so I think it's quite clear there's a shortfall of labour for this farm. But anyway.
Councillor McKee?
So I suppose from our point of view, we've got to consider whether we consider an additional house is justified because of the rented fields, or whether we just decide that it's what's suitable for the full farm as is without the rented part being attached. It's whether we take that into consideration. At the end of the day, farmer could continue to rent the land all over the place. He could be building houses all over the place because the additional rented land. That's the difficulty as I see it.
Okay. Councillor McComb?
Thanks, Chair. On the basis of only the land owned by the farmer, there is a shortfall of labour. It states 8.87 labour units are required. There is only the farmer, his 2 sons, and 2 workers who come in through the week. That does not equate to 8.87. So there is a shortage of labour on the farm. The key point is, does the shortage require to be met by someone living on the farm? Is it essential to have someone on this farm? Well, they're using robotic milking procedures, which I think the high milk cows, it's 4 times in the day. So basically, it is 24/7 demand for working hours. The need is for a specialist who is familiar with robotic milking techniques. And the farmer and his sons apparently do not have the requisite knowledge or skill to actually do this. So how do you attract a specialist worker? They are in very, very short supply. They are in a position to demand high wages and good conditions. And I would say a new house is part of the good conditions. You may not get a new house in a nearby settlement. And to make this attractive to a specialist, to my mind, it is necessary to build a new house on the farm.
I would have to say that personally I don't agree.
Aye.
And I can't believe that the only person working robotics or technically a competent or difficult machinery would be an employee. I used to run an electronic business, and the first thing I did was make sure that I knew how the equipment worked before I asked anybody else to operate it. But that's just a personal view.
Well, just to come back, Chair, on a dairy farm, in many instances, it is the dairy person who is the key individual. That is the person the farmer will refer to if there are any questions about the welfare of the animals or the nutrition of the animals. The dairy person is the key specialist.
I am sure that'd be right. Pauline.
Thank you, Chair. Having consulted with similar farming operations, it appears that on average, one farm worker is required for every 60 cows. Now, that is an average I've taken from 2 farmers, so I can't say it's a definite figure, but it seems to be about correct. At Dalton Hook Farm, there are a total of 255 dairy cows, 659 cows in total. Thereby, there is a requirement for 4 employees for the milking process itself. Should the farmer or his 2 sons be required to leave the farm for family, personal reasons, there are reasonable requirements for at least one additional site worker who's capable to use the actual robotic milking machine. In the interest of economic development and good management, I'd assume that this additional farm worker would have to be fully trained and has to be on site should the family be unavailable at any time. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor McKee.
How far's the farm from the nearest village or group of houses?
Robert, how far is the farm from the nearest village or town?
Chair, I'm just referring to the officer's report on handling, starting on page 21. So at 1.1 on page 23, it says the application site is located in a rural location, approximately 3 kilometres north of Dalton by road. So 3 kilometres, 1.8 miles. Coming back to an earlier piece of advice that I gave to the members in relation to the supplementary guidance in rented land, it's correct that it's silent on that issue, but I've now looked at the case officer's report, and that's on page 26. And if you look at 4.8, it says the development management practice note, which is not the supplementary guidance, it's a different document, policy H3 housing in the countryside, published by the council, is intended to offer detailed clarification on the level and type of information that is likely to be required for any planning application submitted on the basis of agricultural or rural business need. With regard to the labour requirement report, that document advises that the report should set out the full labour requirements, including calculation of standard labour requirement hours worked based on the specific work duties carried out at the farm or business, and this should specifically discount rented land and work contracted out by the business. So that document, which is different, the one I was looking at, sets out clarification of that issue. So apologies for the incorrect advice earlier, but that is the situation according to that development management practice note that's quoted in the officer's report.
We are in a position where we need to decide whether or no we have sufficient information to make a decision. I mean, Pauline has asked for information from other farmers, so did I. I asked about silage cuts. The average is 1 per annum in this area, possibly 2, and yet the labour requirement here says 5. But that's just an opinion of other farmers. It's nothing to do with the information provided in the documentation from the labour requirement on this farm. John and then Jim.
Perhaps in Upper Nistdale it's 1, down in the Stewartry it's 2, 3, or I've even seen 4 silage cuts in a year. This type of intensive dairy farming, where we have many animals welfare and well-being totally governed by the machinery and the herdsmen and the dairymen who look after them. There's so many cows in one area. If something goes wrong, I believe you need somebody there immediately to fix it. Otherwise, the consequences, I believe, could be very severe. I mean, while not a fan of intensive dairy farming, I do understand the mechanisms by which they work, and you really need good trained people on site immediately when something goes wrong.
I would argue 1.8 miles away isn't that far if there's an immediate need. Jim?
In Wigtonshire, it's common to have at least 3 silage cuts, and many farmers will certainly have 4. Given the location of this farm in the Lower Annan Valley, I would think it'll be several cuts that they will be taking.
I was simply making an observation because I did say that we have to accept what the document says. I asked the question as well of other farmers what the situation was in respect of what happens in my area. Pauline.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Robert, I'm not allowed to apologise. Robert, could I ask you what the current situation is in Dalton, which is the nearest village for housing, 1 to 2 bedroom houses? Is it the same as Castle Douglas and Dalbeattie and Kirkcudbright, and that there's a severe shortage, or are there a lot of properties available to rent at the moment? Thank you.
Sorry, I don't know. I can't answer that question. I've got no idea whatsoever. Sorry.
I think the point simply been made by the case officer that in her opinion, it isn't essential that this house is on the farm, that it could be served by a remote employee or an employee living remotely from the farm. However, we seem to have exhausted the questions currently. Do we have enough information before us to make a determination today, or does any member want any further information, or does any member want a site visit? We have to progress to a decision or to the next step, whatever that might be today. John?
Thank you, Chair. I personally have enough information.
Repeat that, please.
Thank you, Chair. I personally have enough information to make a decision today.
Okay. Everybody in agreement with that, Jim?
There seems to be a query about the requirements for operatives on a dairy farm in relation to work, the number of silage cuts. I mean, we were told there are 4 cuts. I have no reason to dispute that.
No, I wasn't disputing it. I was just saying, Pauline offered information that she asked of a third party, and so did I, and the information I got was different from what the labour requirement says. And I was just saying, as an example, I too saw information that differs from what but I did say at the time, though, we have to accept what the document says. The case officers accepted that. I was simply making a point.
On that basis, I think we have enough information.
Okay. Then we will proceed. Are there any other... Jim, can you shut your mic off, please?
Sorry.
Are there any other questions that members have in relation or in respect of this appeal?
I think on the basis of the information we've got, Chair, I don't think there's a justification for an additional dwelling house in that area. I'm sure the accommodation could be achieved in close to the farm, but certainly not on that site that is present, as what's in front of us. You can always bring up reasons for additional workers, but you've got workers there. Why are you not training them to do that sort of work? And if you need additional workers, then you need to advertise for them. And a lot of people travel a long way to work nowadays, and living on site's not always the necessary way to do it. So I would support the officer's recommendation.
Okay. Any alternative view, John?
Thank you, Chair. I would actually ask for the officer's recommendation to be reversed because I think it has been satisfactorily demonstrated that a new dwelling house is essential to attract labour for the operational needs of this farm.
And if that's the case, do you want to attach a condition that it becomes tied to the farm? Otherwise, we're simply giving a free permission to a development.
Yes, I would ask for that condition to be attached.
Are there any other conditions you want to attach as well as that?
No.
Robert, can you offer advice on that?
Chair, just be to ask whether or not on page 31 we've got a consultation response from the roads planning team leader that recommends a number of conditions primarily based upon road safety. They're fairly innocuous. I don't find them onerous in any way. Just wondering whether or not you would wish those to be attached. And then the council archaeologist on page 33 has recommended that there's a directive applied to consent. So that's an advisory note, if you like, rather than a condition, whether or not you would like that imposed as well. I don't see typically any requirement for a condition from Scottish Water. So on that basis, it would just be occupancy, the roads conditions and the archaeological directives. In my view, that would be sufficient if you're granting planning permission.
Are you content to have these conditions attached, John?
Yes, Chair, I am content.
Okay, you have a seconder, Jim McComb and Pauline. Okay, and I'll second Councillor McKee's. Tracy, we have a motion and amendment.
Thank you, Chair. The motion is by Councillor Young, seconded by Councillor McComb, and that is to reverse the decision of the appointed officer and grant planning permission as an exception to policy, as it has been satisfactorily demonstrated that a new dwelling house is essential to attract labour for the operational needs of the farm, subject to conditions including the occupancy, road safety and a directive from the archaeologist. And the amendment is from Councillor McKee, seconded by Councillor Dempster, to uphold the recommendation and refuse the application.
Thank you, Tracy. Councillor McKee?
If you didn't mind, before we go to vote, given that this application is based on the need for a technical expert to operate the milking machines, which seems to be the main reason for this house, could we tie that in as a condition?
No, it would be unreasonable and we wouldn't be able to enforce it. I think we'd have to rely on the integrity of the applicant that that's what he intends to do, or they intend to do. Advice, Robert?
It's common practice to put a condition requiring the house to be occupied by at least one full-time worker employed in agriculture or dependents of that person. It never gets more specific than that. If the business is claiming they need a skilled agricultural worker to operate milking machinery, then we have to go with a leap of faith on that basis. It'd be difficult if you restrict the condition and make it too specialised. It does become, as the Chair has said, too unreasonable, too restrictive. You couldn't impose a personal permission because you don't know who's going to then occupy that post. You don't know what's going to happen in the passage of time with the succession. So my recommendation would be, if it's, it's enough to limit it to a person employed full-time in agriculture and dependents of that person.
Is that an agreement with the mover and seconder? Okay. Can you add that, Tracy, please? Robert, can you just repeat the advice for Tracy?
It was just in relation to the occupancy condition. Just to restrict that to person employed full-time in agriculture and dependents of that person. And then it doesn't get too specific as to which particular purpose it is on that agricultural unit. It's understood that the need is arising relative to this specialised machinery and the role that's needed, but the condition's broad enough to accommodate that person without being too narrow that would be unreasonable.
Pauline?
Thank you, Chair. With robotic parlours at working 24 hours a day, there would be milking at any point in time, I think we could safely assume, 99% sure, that that particular employee would be available at all times to fix or sort any problems with the machinery that's on site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Tracy.
Thanks, Chair. So the motion is to reverse the decision and the amendment is to uphold. Chairman?
Amendment.
Councillor Drysdale?
Motion.
Councillor McComb?
Motion.
Councillor McKee?
Amendment.
And Councillor Young.
Motion.
And the motion carries 3 votes to 2. The application will be reversed and approved, subject to the conditions on occupancy, restricting to full-time agriculture, road safety and the directive from the archaeologist.
Thank you, Tracy. Do any members of the public want to leave or remain? Okay, just carry on then. Tracy, do you want to take us through agenda item 5, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Item 5 is land next to Whitecroft Lodge, Carrutherstown, refusal of planning permission for erection of dwelling house, reference 181757 FUL. Within your papers you have the notice of review, report on handling, observations of the appointed officer, planning application form, decision letter from the Dumfries and Galloway Council, extracts from the Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan and photos of the application site. The grounds for refusal are 1. That the proposal is contrary to the policy of the Council as stated in Local Development Plan Policy H3 and to national policy as set out in the Scottish Planning Policy, which permit the erection of new houses in the countryside only in special circumstances identified in development plans, and none of these circumstances apply in this case. 2. The design of the proposed dwelling house with particular regard to layout, orientation, scale, proportions and detailing would not be compatible with the established character and appearance of development in the immediate locality, contrary to the terms of LDP Policy OP2. The requested method of determination is to be dealt with on the basis of an assessment of the review documents only, with no further procedure. The grounds stated in the notice of review in summary are: when due regard is had to the particular criteria and provisions of the various policy statements this development requires to be assessed against, it can be seen that the balance of those considerations falls in support of the proposal. The development is within the extent of one of the identified villages within the Dumfries House and Market area. The design, detailing, scale and form of the proposal relates well to the overall layout, density and form of the other property it will be observed and considered with. The visual character and amenities of the wider landscape setting that the new building will be seen within, having been greatly and profoundly affected as a result of the recent realignment of the adjacent A75T, will not be significantly or materially adversely affected by the proposal. The settlement pattern and character of the village as a whole will not be detrimentally affected by the proposed development to any materially adverse degree. The plans submitted in connection with this application show that the intended building can be positioned on the site such that it will not overlook or materially detract from the amenities of the adjoining property. The development can be seen to have no significant adverse impact upon the amenities, character or setting of the adjacent property to any material or detrimental degree. It is also maintained that the proposed design properly and appropriately respects the character and amenity of its setting and locality and would not have any unreasonable or detrimental impact upon any existing properties. Comments from interested parties you have from the Roads Planning Team Leader, Scottish Water, the appointed officer and the archaeologist. You have a list of your local development plan policies. So the main issues for the local review body to consider are: does the proposal conform with the relevant development plan policies, especially in terms of LDP policies H2 and H3 and related supplementary guidance? Does the application site form part of the village of Carrutherstown? If it is considered to form part of the village, policy H2 would apply. If not, policy H3 would apply. Does the proposal gain support in principle from the terms of the development plan? Turning to design, layout, orientation, scale, proportions and detailing, would the proposed dwelling house be compatible or not with the established character and appearance of development in the immediate locality? Would the proposal accord with the terms of LDP policy OP2 or not? How much consideration do members wish to give towards LDP policy OP1 in making their decision? The applicant's agent's view is that the requirements of policy OP1 are met, in addition to policies OP2 and H2. If the proposal is considered by members to be contrary to the terms of the development plan, are there any material considerations which would indicate that planning permission should be granted to the contrary? If members were minded to reverse the appointed officer's decision and grant planning permission for this proposal, what conditions would they wish to see attached? Your options are the same for this case as the previous case, and it's now up to members to determine whether you have sufficient information to determine the review today.
Thanks, Tracy. Again, we'll have images, Robert, do we? Members want to see them prior to debate? Thank you.
Yes, Chair. So similarly to the last case, these replicate the pictures which you find in your papers between pages 345 and 349. Like the last case, the case officer has provided the pictures to me with the captions. I haven't been out and done a site visit myself, so I'm reliant on the advice I've got from the case officer. This is the application site seen from the existing dwelling house, and it's looking east. As a reference point, you've got the location plan that's been submitted on page 283 of your papers, and the block plan on page 285. So that's the existing dwelling house. You can see that's marked lodge. So the view is taken from there. It's looking east, so you're looking towards the site of the proposed dwelling house just beyond the gate piers on the right hand side. This is from the same location, but it's looking towards the northeast. So across that access road, and the gate piers, which you can't see, would be on your right hand side. You can see the pool car sitting in the access there. This is the application site itself, looking towards the southeast, so towards the main road. Again, that's the application site looking southeast towards the main road, and you can see the gate piers there. The existing dwelling house marked as lodge on page 285 on the right hand side. That's a view of the lodge from the application site itself. And that's the view showing access arrangements, showing the application site on the right hand side beyond the gate piers and the railings and the existing dwelling house. You can just see that in the edge of the picture to the left hand side. This is now out onto the main road, so this is from the point of access looking towards the east. So this would be the intended vehicle access to the application site, where it connects with the main road. And this is looking in the opposite direction towards Carrutherstown. So this is looking west along that road. Yep.
Robert,
Yes.
you're saying main road. Is that the bypassed section of the former A75?
You'll see the lights there, Tim. That's the new road. Can you not see the lighting columns on the left-hand side?
I see the lighting columns.
That's the new road. That's the former A75.
Forgive me, I'm referring to it as main roads to distinguish it from the access into the site. That's a mistake I'm making. That is the former A75. It isn't actually A75 at the moment, so apologies if that's caused confusion. The advice the Chair's given is correct, yes. And this is a photograph showing from left to right, more distant view. Whitecroft Gate, then you've got an area of woodland, and then you've got Whitecroft Lodge, which is the property we observed at much closer quarters. And we saw the earlier pictures. This is a more oblique view. You've got Whitecroft Gate, which I think is that property, and the new dwelling there with the woodland beyond as well. So that's a much more distant view, and your reference point, your best reference point here is probably the plan on page 283. So you can see the properties there, which are annotated with Whitecroft Gate. Then you've got the intervening area of woodland, and then you've got that lodge building would be beyond there. So this is a much more distant view in the application site in this area.
Thanks, Robert. Again, we have to decide which option we are going to apply, but are there any questions before we decide whether we have enough information to determine this or not? Okay, then we have to decide, members, whether we have sufficient information to enable us to determine review today, request further information in the form of written representations, resolve to hold the hearing again, specifying who will be invited to speak and what matters, hold a site visit, or if we decide that we have sufficient information, no further proceedings required, then we can carry on and determine this today. Do members have any views? Have we sufficient information to determine this today, John?
Yes, we have, in my opinion, sufficient information.
Jim?
I would agree, Chair.
Pauline and David, yeah. Okay. Are there any questions then, members? Pauline?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm just a little bit, well, I've got a small question. Correct me if I'm wrong with this, please, because I'm a bit new to all, as you know. The local community council argued that the roads were within the natural boundary and not the woodland some time back. But I take it the local boundaries have changed, Robert, is that correct? Is there two different local boundary reports at some stage in the past?
Robert?
The old adopted local plans, now this is going back into the mists of time a wee bit, that were adopted in about 2005, 2006, had defined settlement boundaries for the majority of villages in Dumfries and Galloway. There were things known as small building groups, so for example, reasonably sizable places up to the size of Port Logan, for example, were included within that. But for anything above that level, so for example, Carrutherstown would have had an identified settlement boundary in that relevant local plan. The new LDP and the one that's in existence at the moment, the adopted LDP, identifies Carrutherstown as a village, but it does not have an identified settlement boundary anymore. So you're not looking at it relative to an identified line. It's more nuanced than that as to whether or not you consider it to be part of the village. And that's obviously, you know, the crux of one of the reasons for refusal, that the appointed officer doesn't feel that it's located within the village. But that's obviously contested by the applicant's agent. But there isn't a line as such defining this is the village boundary of Carrutherstown in the present LDP, no.
Thanks, Pauline. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. If it is within the village, it comes under H2, is that correct?
Robert?
That is correct, yes.
Side it's H3.
Member? Pauline?
Thank you, Chair. So in this instance, the applicant's trying to future-proof her future needs for her personal needs, and the property does seem to be suited towards this. I've probably not picked it up at the moment. This applicant wishes to build a new house and move there. She's currently living in Carrutherstown or somewhere nearby, but it would save future costs, I would imagine, in care as she ages. Thank you.
Robert?
The case is basically submitted saying, in principle, that the applicant's case is this is acceptable in principle because it's located within the village of Carrutherstown. It forms part of the village. The appointed officer's view and the decision taken is different to that, and there's a secondary reason which is based on if I just look on page 249, the design of the proposed dwelling house with particular regard to layout, orientation, scale, proportions and detailing would not be compatible with the established character and appearance of the development in the immediate locality, and that's considered to be contrary to the terms of Local Development Plan Policy OP2. So beyond the principle, what the applicant's saying is, well, actually this is an acceptable form of development, and they don't agree with that reason for refusal either, and that's set out in the notice of review case that you find in pages 227 to 241. So those are the two key issues really. One, is the principle acceptable? Is it within the village, in which case H2 applies? Is it out with the village, in which case H3 applies, and you would look for some kind of special justification for the house in that scenario. And then you've got the more nuanced issues about design that are contested as well.
Councillor McKee.
Right, Chair. Just in the principle of development, page 247, it's the applications consigned, it's the application site's not considered to form part of Carrutherstown village, and it has the potential to constitute a ribbon development. And I think when you look at the map on page 283, it justifies what's said there, because the site is across a road. Where does that road run to? Is it a public road, or is it just a farm road, or access to specific areas? Because the house is at the opposite side of the road, and the trees, and I think it's logical to accept that the trees form a natural boundary to, well, even the village is so far away from Whitecroft Gate. It'd be difficult to say that Whitecroft Gate's part of the village. Or you could finish up filling that whole field with houses if you went down that road. So I'd find it difficult to accept that it's part of the village. But then that road splitting it doesn't help the situation either.
Robert, do you know where the road leads to?
Yes, we're going on the delegated report and handling on page 245 at paragraph 1.1. The appointed officer has said Whitecroft Lodge is a traditional dwelling. That was the one we saw in the photographs close to the application site, which has a frontage onto the driveway which once served Whitecroft Mansion and continues to serve Whitecroft Mains, which will be a farm, as a secondary access. It's a secondary access to a farm at the moment. It does also make reference to the former A75 trunk road earlier in that paragraph as well.
Okay, so if there are no other questions, Jim?
Chair, another query concerns the lack of an obvious principal elevation. What is the front and what's the back of the house? It's not quite clear.
No, mind you, if the principle of development fails, it'll be in what shape it takes. And I think that's what the planning officer is saying, that in the planning officer's opinion, it's an inappropriate location because it's H3, and the other reason is that there is no principal elevation within the submitted application. Is that right, Robert?
Looking at the report and handling and looking at page 249, you have the two reasons for the decision there, and they're obviously set out in the decision notice as well, which is in pages 295 to 297. So the first issue, yes, first reason for refusal is based on principle, and the second one is based on the design of the proposed dwelling house, particularly layout, orientation, scale, proportions and detailing. So that's what the concern is from the appointed officer there. Obviously you have submissions from the applicant and the applicant's agent which contradict that view, and they arrive at a different conclusion. But so that point is in dispute, yes. You've got the elevations as well of the proposed dwelling house to consider on page 287, and there's a floor plan on page 289 as well. So you can see what the design is like.
Jim?
The point I was going to make in relation to the second reason for refusal, there is really only one property in the locality. So, unless it fits in with that property, you're going to have a problem.
Yeah. Okay. Well, members, do we accept the officer's recommendation? Councillor Young?
I would second that.
Are there any alternative views? Jim? Okay, in that case, it's unanimous that we support the officer's recommendation. Can you just confirm the decision of the committee, Tracy, please?
Thanks, Chair. The committee has decided to uphold the officer's recommendation and refuse the application on the grounds given within the report.
We come to agenda item number 6. Can you take us through the process again, please, Tracy?
Chair, item 6 is land adjacent to 4 and 6 Carlisle Road, Lockerbie. Refusal of planning permission in principle for erection of dwelling house, reference 190160 PIP. Again, you have your notice of review document, your report on handling, observations of the appointed officer, comments of the applicant's agent, planning application form, the decision letter from Dumfries and Galloway Council, relevant extracts from the local development plan and photos of the application site. The grounds for refusal are the restricted nature of this site would not allow a development which would relate to the scale, density and character of existing development, and as such the proposed development would be unsympathetic to local built forms and layout contrary to local development plan policy OP2. The requested method of determination is on the basis of an assessment of the review documents only with no further procedure. The grounds stated within the notice of review are in summary. Given that the site no longer has an industrial use, the applicants are proposing to erect a dwelling on the site to enhance and improve the appearance of the street scene. In planning terms, the site could be classed as an infill site within an established residential area which could round off the development. Illustrative sketches were submitted to show a single bedroom bungalow being built on the site. This would only have used 33.5% of the site area. In design terms, a bungalow would be sympathetic to the adjoining properties, with privacy being maintained and overshadowing being avoided. Consultees raised no objections. The illustrative sketches would safeguard the concerns raised by the public objector. The proposals would benefit the street and bring into use an area of ground that is in its current form, has no other suitable use. Should permission not be granted, then the application site will likely remain in its current state for a number of years to come, which can only be detrimental to the local residents and greater community. Your comments from interested parties are Roads Planning Team Leader, from the objector, the appointed officer, Scottish Water, and the Senior Environment Technician for Contaminated Land. You have your list of development plan policies. And the main issues for the local review body to consider are: does the proposal conform with the relevant development plan policies, in particular LDP policy OP2 and related supplementary guidance? Does the application site allow for the erection of a dwelling house within it which would relate well to the scale, density and character of existing development in this area? Would the dwelling house be unsympathetic to local built forms and layout contrary to the terms of LDP policy OP2? If the proposal is considered by members to be contrary to the terms of the development plan, are there any material considerations which would indicate that planning permission should be granted to the contrary? And if members were minded to reverse the decision of the appointed officer and grant planning permission, what conditions would they wish to see attached? Your conditions remain the same as the previous two cases.
Thank you, Tracy. And again, Robert will maybe take us through the images, please, Robert.
Chair, happy to do so. Like the two previous cases, these images have been supplied by the case officer. I haven't visited the site. I'm reliant on the captions and my own intuition with them. They do replicate the photos you have on pages 507 to 510 at the back end of the papers. So the first one is a view of the application site with 4 Carlisle Road in the foreground. So it's the property, 1.5 storey property with the dormers, 4 Carlisle Road. The application site is the small building and surrounding land that you see in front of the hedge there. So this is looking north along Carlisle Road. You've got number 4 there. The application site is on the extreme right hand side of this picture. And this is looking at it front end on. So you've got a rectangular piece of land there with a building in it at present. If it's helpful, you've got the location plan and the block plan both shown in page 409 of your papers. So that kind of sets the context for it. This is, again, a slightly longer view of the application site viewed between number 4 Carlisle Road and number 6, Carlisle Road. So you've got large hedge in between these properties, but the boundary here is quite open. This is a view looking south along Carlisle Road, so your application site, you can see the tall hedge next to it on the left-hand side. So the application site is actually out of shot here, and this is just showing the kind of nature and character of the properties going south along Carlisle Road. You can see the predominance of quite large detached houses and quite large plots, and the broad nature of the road. This is Carlisle Road looking opposite the application sites. This is looking south, and again, it's just to show the existing character. You've got the hedge feature, which is quite dominant in the street scene, and then you've got the nature of houses round about in comparison with that proposed. This is a closer view of number 3, which is accessing directly onto that road. And then you've got the fuel station just on the right-hand side. So this is looking more towards the north on the opposite side of the road.
Thank you, Robert. Again, members, we'll have to decide whether or not we have enough information to proceed today, but are there any questions first for the case officer? In that case, have we sufficient information before us to determine this today, or are there other measures you wish to take, which could be request further information in the form of written representations, resolve to hold a hearing, again specifying who will be invited to speak and in what matters, resolve to hold a site visit accompanied or unaccompanied, or if we have information that's sufficient for us today, we can proceed. Are we happy to proceed? Thank you, members. Are there any other questions for the case officer? We have seen the images, we have the information before us. Councillor McKay?
Just in looking at that picture there, I think it was the first one, with a sandstone house. It looked like a perfect garage sitting beside it. I think, I don't think that site's suitable for building a house, whatever size. I think the accommodation would be cramped, the whole area would be cramped. And I think a better use than trying to put a house in it would be more suitable for that area.
So are you proposing to go with the officer's
I'd go with the officer's recommendations, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. Are there any alternative views? No. In that case, the decision of the local review body is unanimous that we support the officer's decision. Tracy, can you just confirm that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the decision of the LRB is to uphold the officer's recommendation and refuse the application.
Thank you very much, members. Thank you very much for attendance today. No further business.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.